We are Rangers, yeah. You know it's true.
So hey, welcome to Dragon Song, the one and the only podcast exclusively for Breath of Fire fans across the world. Today we are talking to Casey, a name that hopefully you know, and if you don't, if you're a young whippersnapper, we're going to let you know all about her today because she's responsible for a lot of the online Breath of Fire fandom that we have today. So Livnat and I are going to be talking about the formation of Dragon Tier and how the stuff got started. So Livnat, would you like to take it away?
Sure. I can tell you that the year was, I guess, 2002, and I was looking for some guides online about Breath of Fire because that's the year I got introduced to the game by emulators because they'd never sell the game in my country. Sad. And I'm talking back in the days, you know, when your mom got on the phone and the internet got disconnected and there was noises and stuff. And aside of finding like random sites, I ended up stumbling upon this really gorgeous looking site. And to be honest, I thought it was maybe the official site or so because it had so many details and it had articles and it had so many things. And I never joined any forum before. I was not very good with English, to be honest. Like Breath of Fire 1 actually taught me English because every time I didn't understand something, I went up and opened a dictionary. So I was extremely nervous, so I was lurking around the site for a few days, weeks, months, until I decided, okay, I'm doing it, I'm making an account. And I was very afraid, like, to introduce myself. I was very afraid of anti-Semitic replies, so I never even stated that my country is Israel. And I started to post little by little, more like questioning around, but I was really happy to find out there's actually more Breath of Fire games and there are more people that like the series. And it was great because nobody of my friends or nobody that I knew actually knew about JRPG or games like that, and I got introduced to so many
And
people.
Breath of Fire is a pretty obscure series. I mean, let's face it, I knew very few people over here in the States that were really aware of it. I had a couple of friends who were into the series, but yeah, it's not that well known.
I wasn't even aware of Final Fantasy as it is. I wasn't even aware of Zelda. I think the only games I was pretty familiar with were like the Super Mario Bros. And very few little games, but definitely not JRPG. This was my first JRPG, and I was like, oh my god, this is amazing genre. And from here on out, I started to look for more games, but I can tell you that site was magical. And the people there were nice, and that were not nice were not kept there, which was amazing because when I tried to join other site, I saw all the toxicity there, and I didn't felt at home. So that site quickly became my home. Right away, despite all my what's the word, tumbling around English and trying to understand what was going on.
I felt the same way about Dragon Tier. I always found it very welcoming, and I you know, now it's really fun now that I've gotten a chance to talk to Casey. You know, we all have different experiences with the site because obviously she was an admin, and so she had to deal with a lot of the, you know, the tougher work of it, of dealing with people and this sort of thing. But she did a good job with it because I always found it really, you know, peaceful, really chill place. But speaking of Casey, go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself. How did you get into the series? How did you discover Breath of Fire? Kind of what's your overall journey with Breath of Fire?
Well, first off, thank you for inviting me onto your Cool Kids podcast. It's always a joy to talk about the Dragon Gene System game, which stars the cat girl without pants. So thank you very much for inviting me to talk about that. Just to kind of start, I believe we'll start with the history of DragonTier.net, which I wrote about once out of boredom because I couldn't think of any other content to add after a while. But anyway, it all started when, like Livnat, I was looking for somewhere to go and post and join a community and talk about Breath of Fire. As you imagine, there was very little in the way of active communities. The very first one I ever saw was when I was like 14, and I had AOL, and I was looking around on the clunky AOL browser, and I found the Breath of Fire fan community. which was more or less just a bulletin board system, and it was ran by an older woman named who went by Val, like Valerie, and she had the icon of Valerie from Breath of Fire 2. But it wasn't very active, and the most they had on there were some fan art and then a library of, fan fiction and stuff. So I never really posted there because nobody was really talking about anything, and for a while that's how it was. Nobody talked about it. So I was searching around again later, around when I started going to college, and I found this site called Esper Online, and I'm like, wait a minute. It's like a Final Fantasy thing for sure, but nope, it was a Breath of Fire site that used to be a Final Fantasy site, but now, of course, it's Breath of Fire. It was ran by just a dude named Brandon. He was nice, but he wasn't terribly into the series. I think he may have really liked Breath of Fire 3, but that was about it. He wasn't really around too often, and it's not like a slander towards him or anything, but he wasn't very present. And
Sure.
I started talking to him for some reason, and he's like, you know what, you seem to really like Breath of Fire, why don't you be an admin here, and I'll pop in every once in a while. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. So through that site I met a lot of cool people. Just a couple of names that you may recognize. One name is Chalk Nate, usually went by Chalk, Goddess of Onions. Those two were like my BFFs from there. And then there's Cooley, who was he was the admin of the general discussion / fun times forum. He came from there as well. It really sucks because my memory's failing. But there's also a fellow named Hooded One who came over too at some point. But pretty much there was some drama that happened with the site. Brandon's friend would come on and start trolling everybody. He'd be an obnoxious jerk to everybody, and people would fire back at him, and that made Brandon really mad. So he basically said, screw it, I'm done. Didn't pay for the website, and it was all over. All because people were mad at his friend. So after a while, some other people on the site who I was not as close with went ahead and made their own site, and they called it Angel Tower, which was going to be a Breath of Fire fan site yet again. But the problem was nobody else except for 7 people were really into Breath of Fire. So it just sat there with very little content. And eventually they're just like, you know what, we don't want to do a Breath of Fire site anymore. So they turned it into some really weird site based off of them as a community and called it Project Freakdom, which was like really cringy to me. But whatever. I rolled with it. It's cool. They demoted me to a mod of the Breath of Fire forum, which they kept around. And, I would do like role plays of Breath of Fire stuff on there with Goddess of Onions and still talk about the series. I would clean up artwork that people scanned so that it looked pleasant. It wasn't a stupid GIF file with pixelation all over the place. But yeah, that's how it rolled for a while. And then eventually, me being me, I was making signatures for people on the forum, and I would basically go and look for quotes, like random quotes that people said on the site, and I would slap it on there with like a weird stock art picture, just to kind of be like a troll. And I made the mistake of taking a quote from one of the big bad mods there, and it had to do with his dog, and I had no clue that day his dog had died. He sees that signature on someone's a post, flips out, and he bans me from the website.
Damn.
Oh my god.
Yeah, so basically me starting my website was me getting banned from their website.
Wow.
So yeah.
That's incredible. It's also incredible to me. I mean, you had talked to me a little bit before about Esper and Angel Tower, and first of all, I think it's really interesting that Esper began as a Final Fantasy site and then kind of shifted gears. It seems like there's a lot of interchange between the Final Fantasy and Breath of Fire fan communities, and that's still going on today. But that's fascinating to me, and I didn't know that Angel Tower existed. I wasn't familiar with either of those sites because I wasn't really active online in the kind of RPG forum community at that point. But I think it's neat to hear that there was a site called Angel Tower because that could have been a cool name for a community.
I do remember this site. I think it became some kind of a collective, like a redirect thingy. Like I remember it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what Casey was saying.
Yeah,
that the Project Freedom
thing. I didn't see the previous the way it previously looked, but I do remember I stumbled into it when I looked for other like sites like that. So I do remember I stumbled on it.
Okay. Well, Casey, before we go into how DragonTier.net got formed and the whole story behind that, and that's really ultimately what today's podcast is about, I'd like to know more about how you discovered Breath of Fire yourself. What kind of got you there? Livnat and I have talked about what got us into the series, but you're a really important member of the community and a leader in the community. And I'd like people to know more about you, kind of what got you into Breath of Fire and what made you feel so strongly about it.
That's a good question. Wish it was an interesting story, but it's not. I was going through magazines I don't remember what grocery store it was, but I would often go there and look at the magazine racks because who cares about shopping? So I would look through there, I'd see all the ads, saw this horrible Conan-looking dude, blue hair, some chick with wings, weird-looking ox, doesn't even have pupils, just has... I was like, what the heck is this? It looks nothing like the screenshots of this game. I guess Breath of Fire with a kick of Tabasco sauce? Cool. But, so I'm like, I wonder what this game's about. I knew nothing about what it was about. Like, based off of the artwork, it's just like, okay, this looks like Conan the Barbarian. Why do I care about this? I think I actually got to play the first game when we went to Blockbuster, which for all you young kids out there, you used to go rent your video games there if you couldn't afford them. Very common practice. You would have to return it in like maybe 2 days. Just depends if you did the week or the weekend type rental of the game. I remember...
And imagine how far you can get into an RPG in 2
not very
days,
far. And the nearest Blockbuster was like 20 minutes away from my house, so it's not like it was a hop, skip, and a jump away from where I lived.
Yeah.
Right.
So I did go into the first game. I don't think I ever beat it because my save got deleted by some pleasant fellow who rented the game after me. Yeah, that was a bummer. Eventually, I did see that the second game was coming out because I saw another wonderful ad for that, featuring again Conan the Barbarian and his cosplay of Ryu from Breath of Fire. I think I just liked that he had blue hair, and I liked dragons. The first game isn't really much to go off of in terms of story and deep lore because, let's face it, a lot of it was just taken out during translation and localization.
Right.
But I really loved the second game. I loved basically that it tugs on your heartstrings every 2 seconds at every plot point. It's like, well, I hope you weren't attached to something
Absolutely.
here in this plot because we're about to make you cry again for the 5th time.
So true.
So that became one of my favorite games of all time. I just couldn't stop thinking about it. I have no idea if it was just basically I'm addicted to tragedies, which I could because I'm kind of messed up like that. But I just liked how it all flowed together. I don't know how else to describe it. I just enjoyed the destined child, the whole meaning behind his existence, and that the fact that at the end of the game there's a critical choice you have to make. Well, not really critical, because unless you missed a certain part of a certain event, then there really is no choice. You kind of have to
Yeah.
live up to your name and bite the bullet and turn into the ugliest dragon I've ever seen. But
It was pretty hideous. I find it really interesting that all three of us talking right now have such strong feelings about Breath of Fire 2, and I think that it may have a lot to do with the fact that we grew up at around the same time. Casey was talking about this largely pre-internet era that we all kind of knew, and then the very beginnings of popular internet with AOL and things like that. And obviously, Livnat didn't experience AOL, but I'm sure there was some equivalent in Israel where we're talking about the funny internet noises, that the screaming robot that used to attack you when you tried to get online, and then when your parents got on the phone, it would kick you off. And it's we laugh about it now, but it's all we had then. And to me, it kind of made these memories and experiences more kind of valuable in some way to us, more meaningful, because it was a little bit of a hassle to even get online and connect and all of that. And also with the rental system, I mean, I rented Breath of Fire 2 as well, and we've talked about that. It really does make the game mean more to you, especially if you're a younger person, because you don't have constant access to it. It's not quite like it is today, and I find that really interesting. And what you say about the tragedy of Breath of Fire 2 really resonates with me too, because I think that a lot of the reason the game worked so well in that regard is that it wasn't just a kind of constant, unmitigated attempt at creating tragedy like I feel Final Fantasy often can be. And where Final Fantasy can do it successfully, I think it kind of descends into melodrama sometimes. Whereas with Breath of Fire 2, they temper it by having really genuine, funny moments. There's a lot of comedy. They keep it light, and then they kind of hit you with the unexpected darkness. And I think that's what makes it work so well for me. But I find it fascinating that we all kind of have similar feelings about it.
I really love the quirkiness of Breath of Fire 2, which is really something I love in games in general. The humor is very quirky, and while it may not make you like double over in laughter, it's funny, it's silly. It's something that you can look at and be like, "Oh, well that's silly. Why are you going into a toilet to get a ring?" But then you think about it when you're an adult, you're like, "Oh my god, that is so reality." People do stupid shit sometimes for a drunk witch at a bar. I mean,
Yeah.
sure. Like shoving your hand in a toilet for a ring, sure, that's probably has happened somewhere. Not sure where, but I'm sure
if we go
it
with
has.
with this example, I think that was the best way to show in 2 minutes just how important she was. To the fact that if they go down the toilet, this ring probably meant a lot, and she probably meant a lot to John. So it was a great way to show that.
She was definitely body shaming Jean, though. I'll say that. That really hurt me deep down inside that she rejected him even after that ring. And meanwhile, she's just sitting there thirsty for some twink boy out there.
She was.
He's just there wanting to give her his heart. I mean, that is another tragedy of Breath of Fire right there.
I mean, I don't think Nimifu would survive 1 second on Twitter nowadays. She would be canceled immediately. There's just no way. But but the sad thing about all that is I think she actually legitimately had feelings for Jean, but she was maybe ashamed to admit it. I find her kind of a fascinating character. What exactly was her deal? I think she's a very, very believable character. She's this cold-hearted witch on the surface, but she's got a very tender heart. She just likes to turn, kind of pretty boys to stone. What's wrong with that?
She likes to admire their beauty.
Yeah, permanently.
Can I just tell you that I totally envy your gaming scene? Like, I wasn't familiar with any games at all. Like, unless they stumble by them. As far as I know, at least where I was, the whole renting game was, I don't know, I'm pretty sure we never had something like that. Unless you were familiar with that and you knew exactly where to go. So I'm totally envious of the fact you had a gaming scene and gaming up that to this point. I think in magazine they talked about the big titles like Lara Croft, Tekken, stuff like that. Never about like the more niche stuff or RPG. I don't think I even saw an ad for Street Fighter until much later on. Mortal Kombat, yeah, but
Damn.
not too much. So yeah, I totally envy you.
That's a
guys.
good point. I've
About
spoken to people in Eastern Europe who said the same thing, that you had to go to kind of like underground shops to get access to a lot of these games, and that there was like a kind of a unofficial rental system, quote unquote, that you can engage in, but it was very different from the one that we had in the United States. And it's interesting to think about that. But so Casey, you got exposed to the blue-haired iteration of Conan the Barbarian, and for anyone who doesn't know what we're talking about, you can look at the U.S. cover art for Breath of Fire 1 and 2, and this was kind of echoed apparently in a lot of the advertising for the game, where they, for whatever reason, thought that people wouldn't respond to the more anime stylings of the actual game and its artwork, and they went with this kind of Frank Frazetta, a clone attempt. And it's just kind of laughable. I actually kind of love it just because it's so goofy. It sounds like Casey kind of does too. It's so bad that it's good.
Did you see the ad? Like they say, "Do you think it's just a game?" Like,
yeah,
and he's like raising his hand like that.
What a kick at the basket!
Yeah. I mean, it's like, it was awful, but it's kind of like the Mega Man 1 cover art, and even the Mega Man 2.
I think the Mega
US
Man
art.
suffers worse than that.
Yeah, it was, but
Just be thankful Breath of Fire didn't have voice acting like Mega Man, though.
Oh my god, thank
Oh,
you.
good point.
Like there's one thing I'm keep saying, that thank God nobody had as much interest, because then like the voices and even the voice line in Breath of Fire 5, the only game that actually get a proper dialogue and speaking would have been translated. But I kind of wish they did some kind of translation to the opening intro of Breath of Fire 4, but yeah.
that would have been cool.
Yeah, like subtitles or something. Sorry,
Yeah.
I'm talking all over everybody. That's just what I do.
No. I mean,
it's
that
fine.
was, we're really excited to have this discussion today because we don't get a chance to do this. You're the first guest we've ever had on here, and we really appreciate you for coming on. We're really glad to have this opportunity. And to get back to Dragon Tear for a minute, some people who have more recently gotten into the online Breath of Fire fandom may not even be familiar with it. So to kind of set it out, I'm going to let the two of you give more of the history of it, because I was a bit of a newcomer to it myself. I found it back in the day, but I wasn't there at the very beginning. So could y'all give us all kind of a backstory on how the site was developed and how you both kind of came together and started working on this really awesome Breath of Fire fan community?
Okay, I'll start off first since it's probably easier for me to go from the beginning. Basically, dragontier.net did not even have a domain name when I first started it. I was just, hosting random files, things like that. Eventually, my one friend got us a bunch and was like, you got banned. Why don't you start your own website? I'm sure it would be a lot better than whatever they tried to do. And I was like, you know what? That's exactly what I'll do, because that's what I've wanted for so long, and I've never actually had it. So I made this blue-hued monstrosity of a website. And I didn't even have like a forum page at first. I had what is known as a guest book, where people would visit the website. They would type in their name and like, oh yeah, cool website, and then hit submit, and you would see it like on the wall of the guest book page. That's pretty much all I had at the time. I had like I think a collection of sprites on there. I had artwork that I cleaned up, and I don't really remember much about the earliest iteration of the site, to be honest. I do remember opening the forum, and we actually got a decent amount of people that signed up. Eventually, I just didn't like the software I was using, and we upgraded. But for the younger crowd, a forum is basically where you make a post, kind of like on Facebook, where you like update your status, and you'd make it about whatever you want, like Cat or Nina, question mark. And then, so hey guys, who do you think's hotter, Cat or Nina? Personally, I really love Cat because she doesn't have pants. And then you hit submit. And then other people who are registered could hit reply and be like, you know what? I love Nina. She's sexy. She's mature. She wears really high black boots. And she's got boobs. So, and then you hit submit. And then you got Livnat who comes on and says, I like Nina, she is the black wing angle, and then you hit submit.
Okay, a little explanation there. As I told you, like I was beginning my alleviation of the English language, so so I remember that Casey hit me pretty quickly about the fact that I misspelled Angel as Angel, and a lot with other misspelling. But she was so kind about it to tell me and ask me if it was like on purpose. I think so, if I remember correctly. If you asked if it was intentional or something. And I corrected. I remember I was so embarrassed about this mistake, but at the same time, it was said to me in such a pleasant way. I mean, it wasn't demeaning or anything, that I felt really good about it. So, yeah, I learned how to spell Angel correctly.
Yeah. I think I said something along the lines of, hey, I've noticed that English may not be your first language, and I just wanted to let you know that I don't know if you did it not, if it was intentional, but you may have spelled angel wrong. You have it as angle, which is a completely different word in English. So I don't want people to think you're talking about a mathematical term or anything like that.
Now, in fairness to Liv Not,
Or-
there, I think that there are some pretty important angles in Nina's character design. I think a lot of people are very concerned with the angles in the cut of her dress and things like that. But also, if we were living in the Middle English period, I think the angle spelling may have been an accurate one, or a viable one. But we do kind of troll Liv Not even today a little bit about this kind of stuff. But in fairness to her, she largely learned English. She kind of made an effort to brush up on her English just to be able to play Breath of Fire, which is pretty badass. And I can't make too much fun of her because when I try to speak Hebrew with her, it's comical and I sound like a kindergartner. So
No.
so props to her for fighting through all the stuff.
Definitely.
We joke about it, but it's I think it's kind of cool that Breath of Fire has the kind of international kind of community, the fandom that it does, because first of all, a lot of us don't speak Japanese, and yet a lot of Breath of Fire fans have come to be interested in the language and studied it, due to interest in Breath of Fire. And, there seems to also be a pretty active community in South America, so that's kind of cool. So a lot of different...
I did not know that.
Yeah.
That's true.
Is there still like a South American fan site somewhere? I don't think I recall seeing one, but yeah, I do know that there are a lot of people from like Brazil that signed up on the forum.
I know there's like a big. I know there used to be, and I know there's like a lot of Spanish groups of Breath of Fire, and I know they're not from Spain. I definitely know like they're from other countries. So there's that. You know what other game that the Breath of Fire forum actually caused me to play? It's funny because you mentioned that like Breath of Fire was a subsection of other forums, but I clearly remember that Dragon tier had a subsection for Behemoth Legion, and I remember I took actually interest in that game because you and I think Mary were very hyped about this game, so I played it.
Oh
And
yeah, I
Yo-Yo,
remember that.
My God, Yo-Yo, you broke my heart.
Yo-Yo breaks everyone's heart.
Yeah.
And I think it was Goddess of Onions who was really interested in Bahamut Lagoon, if I recall.
Yeah.
I think she even made like a sub-site on I hosted it.
Yeah, I
So,
think that was the one, yeah.
I'm not familiar with
Yeah.
that game.
Oh, well, if you want your heart broken,
Exactly.
then go play it because the girl of your dreams is about to step all over your heart
Aw.
and then parade around afterwards. I mean, not intentional, but if there's one thing I have learned about that, not to get off topic from Breath of Fire, but I've experienced a situation in which I felt like I have been yo-yo. And then you realize that you don't really feel good about yourself when you do that, but it is something that is realistic and happens in relationships. It's not intentional.
Yeah.
But it was good. I mean, it was the first game that actually introduced the fact that the main heroine just not interested in the main hero.
Which
So
rarely
it
happens.
was
I think
great.
it's kind of cool. I might have to check that out. That sounds interesting.
It's a big Stockholm syndrome type thing, if you
Yeah.
want to
That
know
oh
a
my
little
God,
more
yeah,
about it.
that's true.
Trying to think, yeah. So basically, DragonTier.net was forums, and it just amped up from there. I was adding content. I was writing descriptions for the characters. I was adding wallpapers that I made myself back in the day when everybody used the crappiest resolutions on the planet.
No, they were
good. I mean, maybe I should have started thinking about aspect ratios back then, and I would have.
Well, that is the most
been set for life.
That is the most important aspect of our entire existence, But no, in all seriousness, I do want to say that as a kind of casual observer and just someone who mostly lurked back then, I really appreciated the fact that it brought together all of that artwork and made it so accessible, and the site looked great. I mean, Casey, you joked with me about how it was kind of a journey to get to that point, but by the time I found it, it looked phenomenal. And Casey actually linked us to a kind of a mirror of the site that exists at webarchive.org that you can check out. I may include a link in the video description and on Spotify whenever we put out the podcast, where at least the main page and the main forum page of Dragon Tier are preserved. And it was a huge blast of nostalgia for me because I hadn't seen it in years. And
Yes.
I remember it pretty distinctly. And it's got a really beautiful layout. One of the things that I really liked about it was that it was specifically divided into sections for each game. It had Breath of Fire 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 running in a really beautiful banner across the top. It had art from each of the games, and it had Nina 3 kind of just chilling on the side of it. And so, no matter which of the games you kind of gravitated towards, and we've all got our favorites, there was content for you, and it explained each of the characters really well. It had bios, it had all the official artwork, it had a lot of fan artwork, and it also had sections for quizzes that were really fun. The forums obviously were the biggest feature. Yeah. But translation was a big aspect of it. And I always thought that was really cool because I hadn't started studying Japanese yet at that point. But, anyone who knows me knows that I'm into languages. I'm fascinated in issues of localization and how you translate things, how you, communicate them across cultures and languages. And I thought it was really cool that this site seemed to be so focused on that issue. There were really knowledgeable people who posted there. Some of you may remember their names better. I blank on them now. But really, really knowledgeable people who would go and break down, every item, say in Breath of Fire 1 or 2, and talk about what the names originally meant in the original script. Talk about the enemy names, how they were changed, how they were localized. Really, really fascinating stuff that...
And the actual translation of the official mangas was done on Dragon Tier as well.
Yes.
Like, people were pushed together to help clean the scanning and the actual translation. And it was amazing teamwork from everyone. If it's one thing I do remember about this, it's the teamwork. I remember even Casey uploaded the Breath of Fire 3 drama album translation. That was amazing because I could sit down with the music and listen to it and at the same time read some of it. I don't think it was complete. I could be wrong, but I remember I really enjoyed understanding what I'm hearing. So that was fun.
I don't think it was complete either. I believe Mary did a couple of the chapters on it, but she's really to thank for a lot of for all of the translation stuff on the page itself. On the forums, I don't think we really had anyone that was as knowledgeable as her, but I believe his name is Ronan. I forget the last part of it, but he went by Ronan something, and I believe he... Am I thinking right, Livnat?
Yes,
Ronan.
Right
That strikes the bell with me too.
There was another person, Kojiro, I think. Kojiro something. But Ronan definitely did a lot of translation.
I think he's the one that I remember.
They were both incredible too.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I remember the before and after when Orion decided to completely take and I don't know exactly what he did in the style of the site, but he definitely upgraded it in some facelift, if I remember right.
Orion, yes. He volunteered to help code the site because I couldn't keep up with all of the coding, and I was busy and I didn't really have time to delve into it anymore. He basically took the entire site and put it into like a PHP format. He did all the coding from there on out. He put his own scripts on it and things like that. We did collaborate on the design, but the last design we had was mostly my concept. He took a lot of it and made it more aesthetically pleasing to look at. We did debate about the Nina that we wanted to put on the website, but we decided to go with Nina 3 because the position she was in was just convenient. It fit in well with the banner, so that's why you see her there. Because I would say she's my least favorite. But she fit in so well in there that we're just like, you know what, that's cute. Just put her in there. Looks good.
That's true. And Nina 4 was having like inside the forum, like if there was a new topic, she would look in a certain way, and if there was if there was no new thing, like she would look in a different way. So that was cute as well. I love it.
Oh yeah.
He did that because he loved Nina 4. That's one thing I do remember about him, and I wonder what happened to him. He just disappeared one day. I know that one time he had made a comment to me, something along the lines of that there was little time before he became completely blind, something like that.
Oh my god.
And after a while, he just disappeared. I even tried looking for him using his name, Zareste or Zarest, Zareste, and all I found was his DeviantArt page, which hadn't been
Yes.
updated since 2013.
Wow.
I have no clue what happened to him, but I hope he is alive. I hope that maybe if he somehow listens to this, he could communicate with me and say, hey, I'm alive. I know
Yes.
maybe we had crappy terms that we parted on because I accused him of doing something to the website, which he may not have. But I hope he's alive. I hope Mary is out there somewhere. I wish she would say hello to me because I have no clue what happened to her either. But I don't realistically expect any of these individuals to listen to the podcast. I don't know, maybe they are.
You never know,
so.
though. Yeah, I mean, if anyone is out there listening and you had a part in the history of Dragon Tier, please reach out to us. Livnat and I are on Twitter, and Casey, if at any point you'd like to drop your contact info or where people would like to reach you, feel free to do so. But I'm sure you can find any of us, on various Discords and things like that. So please reach out. We'd love to hear from you. But yeah,
I have a question.
Sure.
Tell me, Casey, what you think about that, because me and Jordan have debated a lot about it. We talked about the good old days and the fact that there is a community. We're sure people still harboring the love, and from time to time they do pop up. People we are familiar with do pop up, but I do think, I don't want to say people moved on, but it does feel like the community today is first of all, I welcome each and every new member, and every time I see a new person being exposed to the game, I'm really happy. Just part of me wonder what happened to the core group, the group that's still more or less kinda around on Facebook and other sites. I'm not sure they even aware of Discord, or if they are, maybe they're not actually participating there. What do you think about that?
What do I think about the lack of strong voices in terms of Breath of Fire nowadays?
Yes.
I think it's just how life is. Like for me, even I've kind of fallen off of the bandwagon. I get back on every once in a while, but I still really love the series. It's just that I've accepted that Capcom no longer values the series. It is what it is. I don't know if they'll ever make another Breath of Fire. The most I'm hoping for is remakes of the game. Maybe if interest happens to peak after Teppen. I don't know. I really think it's a worthwhile investment for them because they're out there churning out, more Street Fighter 2s and more Devil May Cries. So, and plus they're always remaking Resident Evil, but obviously those series have sold more. Monster Hunter's been a great series for them. So I feel like Breath of Fire, there's no room for that kind of series anymore. it just didn't evolve well. But I mean, I think it's just how it is. I don't fault anyone for it. I'm not mad at anyone. It just happens. Like, when you don't have a new game in the series for, how long has it been? Like, almost 20.
2012 was the last game, so yeah.
It's been a very long time. It's only natural that people would move on from it. You can still remember and love the series and speak up when you feel you want to, but other than that, it is what it is. I guess that's the best way for me to say it. I still appreciate when people bring up the memories because that helps me, get my daily nostalgia in. Yeah.
Let me ask you this, on the subject of what the fandom sort of felt like back in the day, what the sort of temperature for the online community was then as opposed to now. Do you think that it's simply a question of the reality that Breath of Fire was more well known and more popular then, that it was still sort of riding on the fact that the series was still at least being mildly supported at that point? We weren't too far removed from Dragon Quarter and things like that, and we didn't have the fiasco of Breath of Fire 6 and that sort of thing. Or do you think that it's just a kind of a result of the broader changes in the internet where things are less sort of, centrally focused? We don't have really dedicated forums for the most part so much anymore. We have Reddit and things like that. Do you think that it has more to do with the history of the Breath of Fire series itself or with the broader changes online?
I would say it has to do with a little bit of this and a little bit of that. Definitely the fact that people found different ways they want to communicate with others on the internet is one factor. Like you said, you can go to Reddit where it has its own dedicated Reddit page. You can go to Facebook where it has its own dedicated Facebook page, and go to Twitter where there's of course a Twitter for that. But I feel like the temperature of the series has gone down. When DragonTier.net was around, it was hot. Now it's cold. There's just not much to talk about anymore. A lot of people that were super into the series have already talked about everything they wanted to talk about. Newcomers will probably try to come to the series and make conversation, but there may not be a lot of people for them to talk about it with. And then I feel like that kind of is a letdown for people that get into the series this late, is because people have departed. They've moved on from it. I don't know if that makes any sense.
No, it very much does. And to be honest with you, that's one thing that makes me sad and discourages me now, because I do see that. I do see people coming into the Discord and maybe getting on Twitter and Reddit and things like that, and they're showing a lot of enthusiasm with it. They may have found the series through the Switch availability. They may have played Breath of Fire 1 or 2 on the Switch, or maybe people are still finding it on the PlayStation Store, with 3 or whatever, 3 and 4. But you do occasionally have people who are still finding Breath of Fire, and I find that they're met with a very kind of a lukewarm response, if not a fairly negative one. I see people saying, and these are supposed fans of Breath of Fire saying, it was always an average series. There was nothing special about it. Final Fantasy. That's something that's kind of perplexing to me, that even people now in positions of power, within the Breath of Fire fan community, don't really seem to like the series, and that's something that I don't really understand. Like, I love it. If I didn't like Breath of Fire, I wouldn't be involved in the community, and I wouldn't have made a podcast about it with Lidnat, and I wouldn't have even joined the Discord. So I don't really I don't really understand that attitude about the series. It's just really strange to me.
Yeah, I've seen that too, and I don't know what to say about that. I feel that people are so far removed from when it was so beloved to them that they only see the flaws, because when you notice that a series isn't being renewed, isn't being worked on, you start to look at the flaws of it rather than what you loved about it. And I know a lot of people hold Breath of Fire 3 very dear to their heart, and most I hear about it is Dragon Gene system, Ryu's trench coat, and I'm just like, what? Sorry, that was like a little rant, just from
No,
someone who's observed
I
the
get
community for a
you.
very long time.
I totally get you. The other day I was listening to a podcast. I was actually taking an hour of my time, an hour and a half to actually listen to it. And the first thing that annoys me was the fact that regardless of the fact that the host of said podcast was not familiar with the game, I'm fine with that. His first episode, which dealt with the first two games, which are, let's admit it, are a product of their time.
Yes.
Which means if you're not exposed to that particular game at that particular time, you might not appreciate it the way we do, and that's fine with me. But when you surround yourself with people who are not familiar with those games, have much more like for the other games, I felt like not only were they very disrespectful, especially when one of them kept calling Breath of Fire Dragon Warrior. I was like, oh my god, if I have a nickel for every time he said Dragon Warrior. I just felt it was very disrespectful. Now, I'm sure like there are going to be other episodes about the future game, which is going to be more favorable. I just felt like it's kind of wrong and unfair. I just want people to be more appreciative. I played a lot of JRPG, and I played a lot of other games like that had not the perfect translation or bad translation. I just feel like Breath of Fire 1 and 2 in particular get the most harsh punishment about that without even knowing the content, without even giving it a try. So it kind of breaks my heart in a way. It just makes me wonder why people are not more open to it. For example, Jordan knows that I'm not a fan of the Final Fantasy series. I tried to get to it numerous times. I'm just not a fan. There's something about the story, the plot, the character. They never hook me the way Breath of Fire 1 and 2 did. And sadly enough, Breath of Fire 3 also failed me. I felt like I wasn't connected to this game. Now, granted, I got to Breath of Fire 3 after playing Breath of Fire 4. And I remember even 4 was a bit different to me. It wasn't exactly like 2. But at the same time, 3 was very disconnected to me. I couldn't follow the plot. Every time someone asks me what I remember about Breath of Fire 3, I remember I'm saying like the Australian dolphin. That's basically the only thing I remember from
Ryu's
this game.
trench coat.
And the transcode, yeah. The Breath of Fire of Ryu was probably the most handsome out of them all, I think.
Uh-oh.
Second only to Breath of Fire 6, if I can say.
I got some competition here. I love to ask Lidnan about like which characters in the series that she finds most attractive or sexy or whatever. Do you think that the dolphin is sexy?
Yeah.
I feel like a lot of times with attraction, personality plays a big factor. So I would say that his very strong alpha male personality is like such a turn on to me, and when you combine it with that like stereotypical Australian accent,
Exactly.
I mean, I don't know what else to say. Like, I'm getting the sweats just thinking about him.
I wonder if there's like a dolphin like fan group somewhere. I'm sure there's like Rule 34 art somewhere in the universe, but I've never gone and dug it up.
There's a Twitter. There's a Twitter. Don't ask me how I got involved in this. Okay, there is a Twitter fan group for Echo the Dolphin from the Sega Genesis. And yeah, there's a lot of pictures of dolphin here, and those group is so awesome. Kind of remind me of the old Breath of Fire community. They're kind of awesome.
If Echo has a fan group, then I think the Australian dolphin needs one too.
Yeah. What I'm trying to say is just I wish people would treat Breath of Fire 1 and 2 the same way other like very niche games are treated. It's just not fair.
Let me say something about that. You mentioned that there are podcasts now that go back and examine Breath of Fire 1 and 2, and they usually do it unfavorably. And that's fine. But I think there's something a little bit, unfair about that. And this is where I'm coming from. They do it under the guise of being objective and critical, but they're missing out on something that you mentioned a minute ago, the word context. they're talking about Breath of Fire 1 and 2 as if Breath of Fire 3 and 4 already existed, and as if Final Fantasy 7 existed, and, Octopath Traveler, and it's like, they didn't. We were still on that road towards, a lot of the JRPG conventions and quality of life improvements that we see now. And it's not fair, and it's not very objective to act as if Breath of Fire 1 and 2 should have just been these, ultimate streamlined, pick up and play games. They have a lot of relics of their time period. And it's weird because I don't see a lot of those same criticisms levied at Final Fantasy. I mean, go back and look at Final Fantasy IV. The script was pretty awful in a lot of ways. And no one talks about that. Everyone laughs about the whole Spoony Bard thing, and they laugh about, Son of a Submariner in 6. But Breath of Fire, they actually had the Goldfly say damn. I mean, they snuck some really crazy stuff in with that script, and yet people completely shit on it, and they act as though Final Fantasy 4 and 6 and even 5 are these gems or something. And look, they're great games. Don't get me wrong. I love all of them, but I love Breath of Fire 1 and 2 as well. And I think that mechanically, Breath of Fire 1 and 2 didn't hold up as well to FF4 and 6, but that's not everything that matters in an RPG. The story is pretty damn important, and Breath of Fire 2 especially had a great story. I think with Breath of Fire 1, they were still getting there. But I would put Breath of Fire 2 story up against any of the SNES Final Fantasies any day of the week. And I'd say that it's stronger.
I think what happened, if you ask me, is just Breath of Fire 1 was way too easy. And then they said, okay, we gotta balance it, so let's make Breath of Fire 2 way too hard. But people forget that Breath of Fire 2 was actually the first one to innovate the concept of town and citizens, and
I
the
know
fact you can bring your characters to have a talk and chat and decide about what's going next and actually
hey,
plan
idiot,
out
I'm
your
finished.
town.
Yeah.
Exactly. Hey, idiot, I did it. It was amazing.
It was. That's one of the main things that drew me to the game. It was it added a lot to the replay value. When you replay Final Fantasy IV, what are you going to do differently in your second playthrough? Tell me that.
Nothing.
Now FS6 had some because you could customize your party.
The shaman system was amazing. Just so many new stuff that I think Breath of Fire 2 was the first to get on them, but it doesn't get the credit for it. And I guess one thing that really upset me about the podcast, because it was, first of all, let me just say, any podcast about Breath of Fire podcast is good. Let's start with that, because they talk about our game, yay. I just wish the person would take the effort to actually surround himself with people that actually care about those particular titles, because I could get that those people are fan and they were probably more connected to other games, and that's fine. Not everyone have to like the same thing I do. I mean, I love Dragon Age 2 and I get a lot of hate for that, and that's fine. But and I don't like Final Fantasy and everyone hates me for that, and that's fine. But what I'm trying to say is, if you're making contact, try to at least come from it from a different perspective, because there are people that this product actually was there for them. I mean, this game, I study English because of this game. I don't think any other game would have caused me to do that. So that's a big deal,
Yeah, I totally get that. And sorry, I'm gonna butt in here real quick. I know that you're trying to charge on in here, Jordan, but sorry. So what I wanted to say was, I can understand criticism against Breath of Fire 1, because if you think about it, there's not a whole lot of interaction between the characters. You really don't see a lot of that interaction. You don't really build a relationship with them that much, because I can't really think of anything that I relate to in terms of the characters.
Same.
I think
the story.
Nina and Days, as Nina and /Blue had a flew back and forth, which was kind of cute, but you
Kinda
don't learn
generic,
too much
ultimately.
from it. Yeah.
There's not a whole lot of I'm trying to think of the word. Jordan will probably know what I'm thinking, but it just feels like you're just going place to place to place. There's not a lot of lore. There's not a lot of It just feels like a lot of times it's a giant side quest.
Yes.
Rather than an overall, well, here here's what you're doing, here's a new plot point, here's another. It doesn't feel like a story that's ultimately connected until you get to the end. You're like, oh yeah, here's my end goal. I was going to beat the crap out of this guy and, try to get my sister. And that's where I feel like they changed it with Breath of Fire 2. But at the same time, they did something different. They kept the same world. They kept a lot of the same familiar towns. Well, at least like 2 of them. But they did something interesting, which we would refer to as world building. They're building a world, the world of Breath of Fire, where you encounter a lot of the same types of people as of the different races. You have like the Grass Runners, you have the Wing Clan, you have, the Dragon Clan, you have, what are they? I guess Builder was supposed to be his own race, but I think what's her face? Was her name wasn't that like a pun like etchy or etchy or something?
Chichi.
Yeah.
Chichi.
Yeah,
A titty F cup.
Chichi. Ichichi cup.
Yeah.
Yeah. But
Best name ever.
and then you have like the
Exactly.
Grassmen. They're ultimately what they were doing with Breath of Fire is that they were building their own world, which yes, I know Final Fantasy has elements like that too, but it felt like they put a lot more effort into Breath of Fire with all of the same clans that they have. All of like they do sprinkle in lore in the second game that you didn't really get in the first game, although ultimately the second game felt like, to me, it felt like it didn't feel like another installment. When you think about it, it felt like, oh, this is kind of like a side story of what happened after Miri was defeated, because she left behind this happy little seed and it grew into such a happy little
Baby.
god, and it started feeding off of everyone's misery. That I don't know what I'm trying to say, but it felt like when I played 3, 2 was like an afterthought of the developers, which I feel sucks because I like 2 so much more. I felt like I was more connected with the characters. I felt that I could relate to the tragedies that they experienced, but it just felt like they glazed over anything that had to do with Breath of Fire 2 and Breath of Fire 3. It just felt like they were only acknowledging what happened in the first game, which is fair because you're dealing with Miria. And I just thought it was kind of crappy. There's no mention of 2 at all in the third game.
That's an interesting point. I didn't personally quite feel the same way. I have a more favorable opinion of 3 than the 2 of you do, but I can see that to an extent, and I agree with you that they did seem to be focusing more on the first game because of the whole Miria aspect. But I do remember that kind of a mosaic before you that you see before you meet with the Dragon Elder. I can't remember the name of the town, but y'all know what I'm talking about. That kind of goes through the history of the series, and I do remember that made me feel as if it was all connected, and also I felt like they were trying to create such a concept of a time gap that had occurred between the games that's maybe why 3 felt more disconnected, and that's why I didn't feel like it was like a slight in terms of Breath of Fire 2 or 1, that it was deliberate, that that the world, so much time had elapsed that even the world had forgotten it, and only the gods and goddesses really remembered the real events that had transpired. Although they, I will say they do gloss over Death Evan. I mean, there's no mention of him, but that may be because Miria was weaving that whole narrative, and of course she wouldn't want us to remember that her progeny was just evil personified. So, but I want to get back for a minute and just say that I totally agree that Breath of Fire 1 didn't have a whole lot of character or plot development. It didn't really have a lot of those basic story building arcs that we might come to expect in certainly Western storytelling. It felt very haphazard, like you said. You're kind of going from point A to point B, which I understand because Capcom was learning how to build an RPG. But that was one of the things that I found not particularly satisfying about the game personally.
Yeah, I agree. And it just kind of, there were no story arcs. That's basically what my issue was with all of it. Like, nothing was a major plot point at all. It just felt like you were, I guess, so to speak, maybe it was a very primitive open world kind of game where you're just going wherever you need to go in order to kind of complete the game. If there's a roadblock, well, I guess it looks like I have to find out what I'm supposed to do here.
Side quest number
A lot of
42,
times.
basically, you know, or fetch quest number 87.
I like it. Maybe because it was my first ever game to it.
We're
I
not
just
bashing
love it.
We're just saying that we can see why people would criticize it in
Yeah, but
comparison to
people-
other games.
I think a lot of people who comes to that are probably spoiled by other game. To me, it was like an adventure. Like, okay, I was so happy that I figured out where I need to go and what I needed to do. And I remember staying up until 6 a.m. because, oh my god, like, again, I couldn't read that well. And I had no idea you need to replace to do certain things. So yeah, that actually took a lot of my time. But I remember when I finished the first game, I was like, okay, what now? I'm so empty. Like, everything is gone. And then I realized there was a second game. I was like, yay, I have
Whoop.
something to do again.
I will
So-
say, I think that Breath of Fire 1 was a fairly nice looking game. It was, you know, it was pretty, it's colorful.
The music.
Yeah, it had a good soundtrack.
music.
I don't think it's the strongest 16-bit RPG soundtrack in the world, but it was nice. You know, there were some pretty compelling songs on it. It definitely, you know, put a strong foot forward as far as like crafting a visually and sonically compelling, you know, RPG series.
I wish they kept the Breath of Fire theme throughout at least Breath of Fire 3 and 4. That would have been so cool if they did, because they did brought it to 2 with a little bit of changes. So if they did something for 3 and 4 or maybe 5, that would have been so cool.
And that's where I can see where you and Casey feel like 3 and 4 represent such a tonal shift in the series, because, you know, on the one hand, I get that they were trying to do something different, that something that looked and felt different because they were moving to a 32-bit platform. And so by making it isometric and giving it, you know, movable camera angles and things like that, they gave it a different feel. And I can see why they wanted to kind of shift the storytelling, you know, feel as well. But it does feel like there's a pretty dramatic break between the first two games and the two that followed. But let's get back for a minute to the community aspect. Casey, I wanted to ask you, you know, at the end of the day, it's been a while since Dragon Tier existed, and two things. I want to ask you about what you most miss about Dragon Tier, but while we've got you, I was wondering if you would explain to us what happened to the site, because a lot of people have, you know, are still in the dark about exactly what was going on, and I hear that asked to this day. They, you know, a lot of people felt very connected to it, and they really miss it. So what exactly was the ultimate fate of Dragon Tier?
The ultimate fate of DragonTier.net was that I was going through a very difficult time in my life. I had just had to make a cross-country move because me and my ex-fiance at the time broke up. I was very depressed. I had no money. And I, you know, needless to say, I didn't know what to do. I had no interest in the website. I didn't have a way to pay for it, so it sat there unpaid for. I know beforehand it had been blocked. When I eventually went to go pay for it, I found out that all the data had been erased by the host, even though they'd been collecting my money despite having my site blocked. They claimed that they needed to delete everything because there was a virus in the files itself. And, you know, that would have been nice to know that they were going to do that before they, you know, deleted everything.
Wow.
I don't know. Yeah, so they had no way of recovering it. They said that I should have kept it back up and things like that.
Wow. You know, it's fascinating and sad to get kind of a peek behind the curtain on that, because I think a lot of times, for those of us who are kind of more casually just experiencing forums and things like that, we don't think about all the day-to-day work that goes into it, and the fact that people, actual people with actual real lives and real problems are caretakers of these sites, that they mean a lot to us, but, it had to have meant so much more to you. And I have to imagine that it wasn't easy to be dealing with all that while dealing with the personal stuff. So I'm sorry to hear that it all wound up like that. Let me ask you this. What do you most miss about Dragon Tier? And what do you think we're losing out on today by not having, the more traditional forum as a kind of a hub for the wider community?
What I miss the most about the website is definitely the community. I know that you guys wanted to bring me on and talk about DragonTier.net and how I did all of these great things, but it would have been nothing if I didn't have a community, if I didn't have people who helped me. Everyone from Orion who helped code the page to all the moderators, which included Livnot, and just everyone coming together to help make this place that Breath of Fire fans can call home is actually what I miss the most. I miss the connection with these people. And there are some people out there who don't want to get that involved in a community, and that's fine. And I think ultimately that's what people are missing out on. Yeah, you can go on Facebook and slap a comment on, the Breath of Fire Facebook post, but you're not going to connect with anybody else really in the long run. Like, you don't make a
Absolutely
detailed post thread off of a comment. I mean, sometimes you do, but most times just people arguing with each other over Ryu's trench coat and things like that. So I don't know why I keep saying that, but ultimately there is no deep interaction or connection with a lot of the community members within, itself. That's what I feel has been lost when you transition to other types of media. You just don't have that anymore, because back in the day, that's the only way you basically had to talk. You just made a post and hoped someone responded to it, and if they didn't, that sucked.
I think you're completely right, and it's a little strange to think about on the one hand, because there's nothing directly stopping anyone from having those kind of deep discussions or forming those deep connections through media like Facebook, but it just doesn't happen. And it's fascinating to think about why. I mean, on forums, we tend not to use our real names. We use pseudonyms, and maybe those are more colorful. We've got kind of avatars. We don't just have these kind of empty-eyed, soulless Facebook, selfies or whatever for our profile pictures. I really, it's kind of fascinating to think about why.
commented on your post.
Yeah, I mean, I know I myself.
Who's this chick commenting on my post?
I know I have this super serious wannabe author profile picture or whatever. It's my Facebook avatar right now, and I probably look like a serial killer. So it's probably harder to form deep connections with someone that looks like a potential serial killer.
Yeah, I don't want to form a deep connection with you looking up at the sky like, who will I kill next?
Yeah, I'm gonna steer clear of this guy.
Are you the new antagonist in the new season of You, the show from Netflix?
I haven't caught that one. I haven't even caught up with Loki yet, so I'm way behind on all my pop culture stuff right now. But it is a shame. I mean, I guess certainly with things like Discord and Twitter, they're more ephemeral, right? You talk about kind of the fly by night, just make a random comment and then no one sees it. You're just lost in this kind of a sea of chatter, which is a shame. But it's weird that on sites like Reddit and Facebook, we don't have a little bit of a deeper discussion going on, but it just doesn't happen. I think Reddit has its own issues, unfortunately. I use it, but for some reason, Reddit tends to be a little toxic to me. It's just the people in there can be pretty obnoxious, so I don't know what it is. and I don't know what it is. Maybe I got lucky, but I genuinely had a much more positive experience with Dragon Tier and even Dragon Brood. It was more kind of chill, more laid back. And I think that, Casey, you're very self-deprecating and you seem modest and you don't want to pat yourself on the back too much. But I think that you and everyone else that, including Lenat, that worked so hard on Dragon Tier, did a really good job of making it a fun, kind of a welcoming place, because I always really legitimately enjoyed it.
Well, thank you, but I mean, again, I know I am modest. I'm just saying that you can build a website, but if no one goes to it, what good is that? That's why I say that I credit everybody in the community who showed up, had a discussion, talked about what they did. That's really what made Dragon Tier. I just was lucky enough to be the person who ran it and got to see everybody grow, because Dragon Tier.net was around for about, I want to say, like almost 11 years. So being able to see the same group of people over 11 years kind of grow up together and have discussions, eventually, into off-topic conversations too. It's really a nice thing to see.
It was really kind of the perfect storm. It was just the perfect confluence of a really capable team of admins and a really kind of a robust community at that time that we don't quite have in that form now. We've got people that are really dedicated. There's still really wonderful fan art being produced and fan music, cover songs and things like this. They're still being produced. I just wish that we had more focus as a community in terms of being able to promote these things. But like you said, I mean, a lot of that is, I think, just a result of the fact that Capcom hasn't been showing a lot of love to the series, and that even little glimmers of light like the Teppen crossover are just like huge for us as a Breath of Fire community. But in the end, getting here, towards the end of things today, I wanted to ask you a couple of things, and this may be the most important thing that we kind of put to you today. I wanted to ask you, talking about Dragon Tier and the way that it all played out, as opposed to the way the community looks now. What can we do as a community to increase awareness of Breath of Fire and do what we can to make sure that Capcom does more with the series? What can we do to grow as a community, and what can we do to kind of get Senpai's attention and make Capcom kind of notice Breath of Fire again?
Well, it is really hard getting Senpai's attention if Senpai is pretty much like every other Senpai in anime. I think the most important thing people can do is just have presence. Be there, show your love for the series, even if it's a fan art, if it's a fan fiction. I don't know if people still write fan fictions, but we need to see those. We need to see people talking about it more. Talk about it positively. Don't be out there talking smack about it. Just things like that.
Yeah, because
it's all about presence. We can't really do anything with our wallets anymore, Capcom. Do you want us to buy the same game 50 times to let you know that, hey, we want a new Breath of Fire? Here's $5 for this digital game that you've re-released for the 8th time on a different console.
Just to be honest, if they ever did make the game come on Steam, I'm getting them. So
I
I'm
will
putting
too.
my money there.
Yeah.
And I kind of wish they give us a way to get the GBA version as well on PC. That would be amazing.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure why they just don't release a whole collection, just like the Breath of Fire collection. Just do 1 through 5, slap it on Steam, and people will probably buy it. I don't know why they haven't.
I know that 5 has a little bit of issue because I remember that my game actually broke my console, or the other way around. I was able to get Breath of Fire 5 and actual PlayStation 2, but it kept warming up and the game kept being stuck. So I said, okay, let's just emulator that. And when I did, I ended up cheating a little, and at one point around the ending, I ended up doing a quick save. Now, I did notice that when I tried to save it as to start with this game over, the game didn't save. It didn't recognize it. So they did something very smart with this game. So I wonder if like Breath of Fire 5 in particular will be a little bit tricky. Because
I
I
don't think
remember
it will be. I think
I
it probably...
remember it didn't let me play with a remote control with a controller of PlayStation 1. So
Huh, that's weird. I don't think I've
Yeah.
had that issue. But I feel that Capcom employs some very talented software people, so I'm sure that they could figure out how to convert those to a format that is friendly for Steam and PC. But again, I think they want us to buy it, and they're not confident that we will whip out our wallets for it, so who knows. I do wish they would release another one. That's like one of my biggest fantasies. I'm sure everybody at some point who is a big fan of Breath of Fire has been sitting there fantasizing about their own Breath of Fire game.
Oh yeah, I mean, especially
That was
now.
that's one thing we used to do on DragonTier.net, if I recall. We would make our own Breath of Fire because we were bored. I had made a thread like, design a Breath of Fire, and everybody would get together and design a Breath of Fire, throw out pictures, ideas, characters, concepts, things like that. It was a lot of fun.
There's so much that could be
But
done with it, and
people to this day actually doing that. They kind of they don't call it Breath of Fire, but I've seen a few games that were heavily inspired by Breath of Fire, and they kept that in mind. So props to them.
Was it called Ryu's Trenchcoat?
They kept
I
the
would play that.
style of free.
That's
They
my
kept
new
the style
game,
of free.
Ryu's Trenchcoat.
Oh my god, it's
what
amazing.
if we had the Australian dolphin in Ryu's trench coat?
We need the Australian Dolphin app. It
I
will
need
be
you to
like
stop
a
right now because I
motivation
don't think
app.
I can handle that thought.
It will be like motivation day. Like instead of Duolingo, like popping you up to try new languages, it would be like, cursing you because you're not good enough or something like
Oh,
that.
that would be great.
It'd be
true.
such a
Another game I would love to see is Bosch and the Mama Nugget from Breath of Fire 5. That would be an amazing game.
Absolutely.
Their love story needs to be told, and I will not stop until it's told.
exactly.
I think
Oh my
Capcom
God.
personally tried to silence me by bringing down my website. I think maybe there were like weird feelings they had about like a interspecies couple, which I feel they need to be canceled for.
I think that's
So
Oh my
Capcom, I'm looking at you.
Yeah.
I mean, you can make this right. You can hire me to make a Breath of Fire game. We'll do it right
Exactly.
together. I'm always available. I'm sure you know how to reach me because I bet you guys spy on me personally. Hold on, I need to adjust my tinfoil hat. But I mean, yeah, they can reach out to me. We'll get that love story out in a jiffy.
Exactly. Didn't Camelot try to reach out to them to get
Yes.
the IP?
Yes, and they did not want to sell the IP to them,
Oh my
which
god.
I think because they want to keep remaking it. But I feel like they could make a very successful Breath of Fire game if they surveyed fans of it. They surveyed the fans and tried to get a feel to what people want, which I feel if they took a formula similar to Monster Hunter, which is very popular, and take elements from there and combine them with Breath of Fire, you'd probably have a really good game. That's just my opinion. But they're probably thinking, well, why would we do that? We'll just call it Monster Hunter.
I saw the Monster Hunter story, something like that, and I remember I was looking at it, at the trailer. I was like, oh my god, is this a new Breath of... it's Monster Hunter.
so. On that kind of bittersweet note about what made the series so great and how we'd like to see more of it, I do think that there's room now, and there's maybe some glimmer of a possibility because the landscape for RPGs now is very different than it was in the late 2000s and early 2010s. Capcom put it in no uncertain terms. They made it very clear that they just didn't think that the gaming landscape at that time was very conducive to a new RPG, but I think things have really changed. I mean, we have things like the aforementioned Octopath Traveler and Monster Hunter stories, from Capcom themselves. And maybe Capcom is going to just allow Monster Hunter to be their thing, but I'm taking hope from the fact that they've alluded to Breath of Fire really strongly in Monster Hunter, and that they put it in Tekken. And, to me, maybe I'm a hopeless optimist, but hope springs eternal, as long as they haven't completely forgotten about the series. Until that happens, then Breath of Fire is not dead. So you never know. I would encourage all of you to kind of keep the groundswell going and do whatever you can to promote Breath of Fire. But I'd like to take a minute to really thank you, Casey, so much for coming and joining us today. It's been really awesome getting to talk to you and get to know you and understand more about one of my favorite sites in the
Ryu's Trenchcoat.
And the Breath of Ryu's Trenchcoat, my favorite series.
And the Breath of Ratio.
The Breath of Ratio, Breath of Australian Dolphin, Breath of Dragon Gene.
Cats Without Pants.
Cats Without Pants.
And Jen/Rand fanfic.
Ooh.
Out in stores now.
Yeah, look.
I want to thank you for having me on, though. Sorry, I don't mean to talk over you, but I also really want to say that I am so happy and so grateful for everybody who has picked up the Breath of Fire fandom and just continued it, carrying on the torch. I'm so very happy to see whenever anyone has any kind of Breath of Fire project. I try to, usually make a comment or give some kind of encouragement. I'm just very happy and pleased to see that the spirit is still alive. So that's all I wanted to say to everybody is thank you.
You deserve a lot of credit for that.
Yes, 100%. And it's really magnanimous of you to feel that way.
I don't like to be like that. I'm just one person in the world. Everybody has contributed.
Well, your contribution meant a lot to me and to Livnat. And, look, I've said it before, but Dragon Tear is how I met Livnat. So, at least one person in the world met the love of his life because of your hard work in making a really healthy, positive Breath of Fire fan community. So it really meant a lot at that time to be able to find like-minded people who liked this relatively obscure kind of niche game. It was a really, really cool thing at that point in my life.
I'm so happy for you guys. Just make sure you name your first child after me and invite me to the wedding.
Okay, absolutely.
Okay.
You will have a place of honor, and I'll make sure that all of the groomsmen are wearing Ryu 3 themed trench coats. So
Thank you. I hope they're like trench coats and everybody has tuxedo shirts on, because you got to be a little thrifty in today's world.
That's true. And so just in closing, I want to thank you again so much for coming on. It really means a lot, and thank you for all your amazing contributions to this awesome community. And also, I'd like to thank my beautiful black-winged angle, Livnat, for everything she did as well.
Definitely.
I'm not going to hear the end of that.
My favorite black-winged angle.
So, look, y'all take care. It was really good talking to you. And, from here, from us here at Dragon Song, we're just wishing you all a great day. Hope you enjoyed the podcast. And, Casey, if you're down for it, we may get you on here at some point and have some more silliness. We've really enjoyed having you. And
exactly.
That'd be great if you need some really stupid comments about Ryu's Trenchcoat. I'm all for it.
We also considering adding you on some recording for some more craziness.
We need you to be Patty, yeah, for sure.
That would be amazing.
The Jean X Rand fan fiction?
Yes.
Is that what I just heard? I'm in.
When is that coming out, by the way, so that all of our fans know?
I am working on it right now. It's going to be this great, very descriptive point of view from Patty the Phantom Thief herself as she peeks through the windows and watches Jean deliberately break his television so that Rand, the big, burly, handsome TV repairman, comes over to fix it. And boy, oh boy, do the sparks fly. I tell you what.
I'm getting all hot and bothered just hearing about it. I mean, my God. Well, until the great day when a star-crossed romance of Rand and Jean is coming to a literary outlet near you, hope you're having a good one, and farewell from us here at Dragon Song, the Breath of Fire podcast.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Smell you guys later.